The key events of the First Peloponnesian War. 460 BC, Sparta invades Attica. 457 BC, Spartans and their allies defeat Athenians at the Battle of Tanagra. 445 BC, a peace treaty is signed between Sparta and Athens.
The First Peloponnesian War was a significant event in Greek history. It marked the end of the Athenian Golden Age, and it led to a period of Spartan dominance. The war also had a profound impact on the development of Greek democracy.
In the early 5th century BC, Greece's three states allies, including Athens and Sparta, faced the invasion from Persia, which was called the world's strongest empire at the time, and the Greeks succeeded in defending themselves after struggling hard. Athens, which showed a dazzling performance in the Persian Wars, quickly emerged as the center of the police world. In particular, the naval power of Athens, which was shown through the Battle of Salamis, dominated the Aegean and Black Seas after Persia retreated, along with it came dominance in trade and commerce. After the Persian War, Athens prospered around the Pericles, and his popularity attracted outstanding scholars and artists. And as a feature of ancient society, the functional comedia, in which all adult male citizens participate, was strengthened. Pericles emphasized that Athens was a true democracy in which the citizens had power, something that every polis should emulate. The era of Pericles is also called the heyday of Athenian democracy, but other perspectives contend that the era of Pericles' dictatorship made the citizens a shield. The age of Pericles brought the greatest prosperity for Athens, but along with those who benefited, there were also those who made sacrifices. There were about 100,000 slaves who worked tirelessly to enrich the 40,000 citizens of Athens. Athens, which was the center of power in the Delian League, also received tributes from other polis, city-states for naval protection.
Eventually, dissatisfaction with the allied polis began to build up, and Sparta, which felt threatened by Athenian democracy, began to distance itself. In the meantime, Sparta maintained a social structure in which a small number of elites ruled over a large number of heletae, so the Athenian democracy spreading throughout Greece was not very welcome. The conflict between Sparta and Athens erupted in earnest during the Helot Rebellion that occurred in 465 BC. Helots were inhabitants of a place conquered by the Spartans who were degraded into state slavery. They usually had to do what the Spartan state ordered them to do, and they were sometimes mobilized directly to the battlefield as combat practice opponents who could be killed by Spartan trainees.
Sparta summoned its Greek allies when they rebelled, but while holding hands with other allies, they just sent back 4,000 Athenian soldiers led by the Athenian general Cimon. The official reason was the Athenian military's rude behavior, But in reality, it was a suspicion that the Athenians might betray them and help the Helots. This behavior by Sparta was evidence of diplomatic distance from Athens, unlike when they united to protect the whole of Greece during the Persian Wars. Sparta's blatant distance eventually made Athens turn on Sparta too. Athens reached out to other polices besides Sparta, among which were existing Spartan allies.
In other words, Athens intended to isolate Sparta from the Greek world in the future. When Sparta suppressed the Helot rebellion and expelled the rebels, Athens approached the Heloti and entrusted them with the role of keeping Sparta in check. 5 years later, in 460 BC, war broke out between two of Sparta's allies, Corinth and Megara. Athens thought their opportunity had come and joined with Megara to fight Corinth. Athens and Megara became allies and were at war with Corinth for 15 years. This war is called the First Peloponnesian War. In general, the Peloponnesian War refers to a long-term war between the Delian League and the Peloponnesian League, which began in 431 BC. If you look at the situation in which Athens and Megara joined forces in 460 BC, Megara was located at a strategic point on the isthmus of Corinth, which was an important place to block the Peloponnesian allies from invading by land. At the time, Athens was sending a number of expeditionary forces to help Egypt gain independence from Persia. Because of this, even though Athens was not a complete and normal military force, it mobilized rather young soldiers and even retired old people to fight Corinth. In the end, the allied forces of Athens and Megara, which mobilized all their strengths, succeeded in subduing Corinth. Athens had been exercising only diplomatic power, but it actually physically showed up its power as needed. Then Aegina, founded by the Dorians, who felt threatened, joined the Peloponnesian alliance centered on Sparta. 2 years later, in 458 BC, Sparta, which could not stand the behavior of Athens, began to intervene in earnest in the struggle for regional supremacy in Greece. Spartan army was successful in their expedition across the sea to support their allies in the Gulf of Corinth, but they were unable to return to Sparta because the sea route was blocked by the Athenian navy. The Spartan army, unable to return to Sparta, changed their strategy and advanced the tanagra in Boeotia. The reason Sparta was able to advance further in a situation where it was impossible to go back was because there were forces within Athens that wanted to overturn democracy. As for the Athens' position, unlike the original expectation, Sparta suddenly approached Athens, and they were surprised and entered into a decisive battle, the Battle of Tanagra, in which both armies suffered enormous damage. The Spartans had a slight advantage in the battle, but suffered heavy losses like the Athenians and were forced to withdraw overland. Athens, despite heavy losses facing Sparta, won a landslide victory against Thebes at Oinapda a year later in 457 BC. It was also a moment that showed how strong the power of Athens and Sparta was among the Greek polis. Athens succeeded in turning most of the provinces of Boeotia, except for Thebes, into pro-Athens affiliates.
Around this time, a wall was built between Athens and its outer port, Piraeus. This wall protected Athens from the threat of Sparta and facilitated the transportation of key resources such as food through naval power. Athens, which had a strong navy, succeeded in attacking Sparta's weak points by dispatching a fleet to the Peloponnese. Athenian activity in the Greek world continued, but Athens' momentum took a sudden downturn. Right away, the large-scale Egyptian expedition for independence from Persia ended in disastrous defeat, which shook the entire Delos alliance. To put it simply, Athens, which boasted of its strength inside Greece, showed that it was no match for Persia, even though it had poured all its strength into the external forces.
And the other polis no longer felt a sense of alliance with Athens. As a result, Athens focused internally to prevent the collapse of the Delian alliance, rather than turning its attention to the outside world. In 451 BC, the chieftain of Cimon, who had been exiled to Athens for ostracismos, returned. He had long pursued a pro-Spartan policy, for which Athens thought that he should be exiled. However, when Cimon returned, the citizens of Athens asked Cimon to conclude a truce with Sparta. This initiative led to a brief truce between Athens and Sparta.
Athens, which thought that the interior of Greece was somewhat organized, fought a battle with Persia centered on General Cimon in order to raise its pride again, but Cimon died on the battlefield. Thebes attacked Athens just in time to make matters worse, when the influence of Athens seemed to be weakening. At the Battle of Coronia, Thebes defeated Athens and regained all of Boeotia. Since then, Athens has faced a series of crises, such as a rebellion in Euboea and an anti-Athena coup in Megara. Eventually, the road that blocked the Isthmus of Corinth was opened, and Athens marched to Sparta, forcing Athens to give up Euboea and return to its homeland. Sparta swept the Attica region and drove Athens into a corner, but returned to Sparta without making a perfect finish. The reason was that Pericles of Athens succeeded in bribing Cleandridas, who was an advisor to the king of Sparta. When Sparta returned, Pericles led an army back to Euboea to suppress the rebellion. Cleandridas, who gave the power of Athens to the king of Sparta, was given the death penalty. In the meantime, an agreement was reached between Athens and Sparta, which had been struggling in Greece.
The peace treaty was about acknowledging each other's forces and discussing issues in case of problems. And although peace continued for a while, it did not mean that they were close to each other. For example, when a rebellion against the Delos alliance broke out on the island of Samos, which was supported by Persia, and Athens was in danger, Sparta just stood by and watched.
Athens and Sparta had joined forces in the invasion of Persia and showed the unity of the Greek people, but then they became even worse than some others. This development meant that the Persians did not need to physically occupy Greece at all costs. Persia was in a situation where the Greeks were fighting each other and losing strength, so Persia just observed and enjoyed the situation comfortably.
The fierce conflict between Sparta and Athens during the Peloponnesian War is similar to the conflict between South Korea and North Korea on the Korean peninsula. Both conflicts are between people of the same ethnicity, and both conflicts are rooted in political differences. During the Peloponnesian War, the Persians might want it when the war between Sparta and Athens drains their national power and weakens it. Likewise, countries around the Korean peninsula will hope that the continuing conflict between South and North Korea will drain both countries' national power and remain a divided Korean peninsula.
Thank you for watching the video, The First Peloponnesian War, provided by History and Current Events. Gina, Bella, and Tony have contributed so far as narrators. Thank you.